Okay, the topic of discussion today is obtaining financial security as an organized family. One of the most important things that we wanted to accomplish is to obtain financial security as a family. So this video, this presentation will be me explaining what that is and how we can achieve it in a practical sense. Okay. First thing we want to do is define financial security. Different names for similar ideas, right? Some people say financial security. Some people say financial freedom. Some people talk about FU money. The fact of the matter is these are different names for a very similar idea. So So if you hear people using those terms, there may be some slight differences in the term, but generally speaking, people are talking about the same thing. Okay. For us, what does it mean though? In the second bullet point, I put it simply means when our passive income can pay our bills. Okay. Long story short, what that means is we want to, as a family, we want to save up enough money and then use those savings to purchase assets that then produce income, enough income to pay our bills. What that means is the income that we are currently making from our jobs will not be the only source of income when it comes to paying our bills. We want to be able to free ourselves from having to overly rely on our income from work, right? So when we're able to save up enough money to purchase enough assets, then these assets can then be used to produce income that pay the bills that our jobs used to pay, okay? Why is this important? It's important for a few reasons, a lot of reasons. I just list two or three reasons here, but really the list goes on and on about why it can be important to have financial security. But in bullet point number one, I got here, maintain the standard of living when facing adversity. The best example of that is if a person loses their job, we want to still be able to, if some family members or a number of family members lose their job, we don't want our standard of living to change, right? We want to still be able to have food in our stomachs. We still want to have a roof over our head, so on and so forth. We don't want our life to change just because somebody's job situation has changed, right? So one of the most important things you can do when you're creating financial security is you are able to maintain your standard of living even if people lose their jobs, okay? Number two, the ability to work less if desired. Well, if we have assets that are producing income, then we actually need to work less if that's the case, right? So long story short, we have the ability to work less, but if it doesn't mean that you have to work less. Some people work jobs because they like jobs, because they want something to do with their time. But the point here of having financial security means that we are not forced to do it, and we're not under stress, and we're not under pressure to do it. We work because we want to, and we have the ability to work less if we choose to, okay? The last bullet point here, freedom to pursue other interests. This is very closely related to the second bullet point. If I work less, then I clearly have more free time to do other things that I want to do. So that's that. Okay, I want to do a practical example. I think I already opened the spreadsheet. So let's see. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so in order to illustrate this idea, in a practical sense, I created this spreadsheet, right? And the first thing I want to do is get you oriented to the spreadsheet. So the first thing I'll say is a family, depending on the situation, you may have 100 family members, you may have 200 family members, you may have 20 family members who have agreed to come together in order to work and build things together. In this example, I've just chosen 8 family members because I wanted it all to fit on the screen at the same time. So, but it really doesn't matter how many family members you have. The same basic idea that I'm talking about in this presentation will apply across the board, okay? First thing first, up top, let's get oriented to the spreadsheet. This is basically just a budget, right? And it's really what it is a consolidated budget of several family members. So over here, you see the income items with gross income at the top, some of the payroll deductions, and then you have your take-home pay here at the bottom. Here is just your expenses, rent, cell phone, etc., etc. So all the expenses. So income items here, expense items here, and then once you net that together, you have what we're calling net investable cash. We know what we make as our income, the money that we spend on our bills, and then what we have left over is what we invest, okay? So that's that. So long story short, I just created this budget for all of these family members, 1 through 8, and then in this column, I totaled it up for the month, and then in this column, I multiplied it by 12 in order to get the yearly totals, okay? Okay, cool. So what we'll do is take this yearly total and move it over to this this other page so that we can work with it a little bit. Okay, cool. So basically the yearly totals, this is basically the consolidated yearly financial statement consolidated budget for a family of 8 that I just showed you on the previous page, right? As an example. Okay, so at the top, they're making $717,000 per year. They're bringing home $552,000. They're spending, if you total up all of their expenses here, they're spending $298,000. Okay, and what they have left over is $254,000 as a family collectively. Okay. Okay, so now as we start to dig into the idea of financial security, let's ask ourselves a few questions, right? Ask ourselves a few questions. Number one, how much income do we need our assets to produce in order to cover our expenses? Since that's the main thing that we're talking about. Financial security means we need our assets to produce income to pay our bills. So question number one is a very logical question. How much income do we need our assets to produce in order to cover our expenses? And the answer is very simple. If we go back up to our budget, we see what our total expenses are here, and it comes up to this 298, right? So this 298,000, almost $300,000 per year in this example is what the family needs their assets to produce in order to cover their expenses. If we want our assets to be able to pay our mortgage, if we want our assets to be able to buy our groceries, then et cetera, all of these expenses added up, then we need our assets to produce enough income to cover this 298,000. Okay, so the answer to question number one is this 298,000, and that came from just bringing down the total expense number. Okay, so that should make sense. So okay, after that, that takes us to some business assumptions, right? So if we want to purchase an asset that's going to produce this amount of income, then we need to start talking about some of the business assumptions, right? So like we said, the net income from this business needs to equal our expenses, which is this $298,000. So so if we purchase a business, if we're purchasing an asset, the amount of income that asset needs to provide us is the same amount as the amount of our expenses, which is this 298. Okay. Another assumption that we have here is the price multiple. If you want to learn a little bit more about price multiple, take time to look it up. But essentially what it is a valuation metric for a business. Long story short, you have to pay for it. When you buy a business, you have to pay for a business. A price multiple is one little easy way that people use to estimate how much you're going to pay for a business. So long story short, if you have a price multiple of 4, what that means is if we want a business that's producing this 298, then more than likely, if the price multiple is 4, more than likely we're going to have to multiply this 298 by 4 to get a purchase price of this $1.1 million, right? So if we want a net income of 298 and the price multiple is 4, that basically tells us that the purchase price will be this $1.1 million that we see here. Like I said, if you want to learn more about price multiples, take time to look it up and look into it a little bit. Okay. Another thing that's related to this is, if we have a business that fits these assumptions, then essentially the return that we'll be making is 25%. If we have a price multiple of 4, then and if that turns out to be true, then what we will be making is 25% per year on this business. Okay. So, but the main important thing here is we want the net income to be this 298 because our bills are 298. Okay. Now, question number 2 is, how long will it take us to purchase a business that produces that income? Now, the answer to this question depends on a couple situations. So what I've done here is created like a little quote unquote matrix in order to analyze the answer to number 2, right? So depending on how we're trying to raise this money. So let's say, for instance, and right here I got the funding type, either all cash or maybe we'll use debt with a down payment. So let's start here with option number 1. If we were funding this with all cash, meaning we needed to save up the entire amount, and we were starting with 0, then essentially what it would do is the amount of time that it would take us to save that money would be a little bit over 4 years, right? Approaching 5 years. And the way that I calculated this number is the total amount that we needed to raise, which is this 1.1 million, and I'm dividing it by the amount of savings that we have, right? So if we need a total of 1.1 million and every year we're saving 2.54, then essentially what it would do is it would take us this 4.69 years in order to save that money. Now, like I said, this is in this scenario, right? If we're trying to save all cash, if we're starting from 0 and we're trying to reach this total amount of money, and this is how long it would take us, right? Okay. Another possible scenario is this all cash scenario, But in this scenario, we're not starting from zero. Let's say, for instance, we already got about $300,000 saved up. So if we already have $300,000 saved up, and the total that we're trying to reach is this 1.1 million, then what that means is we have $892,000 more dollars to save. And if in this scenario, it would only take us 3.5 years in order to save up the total 1.1 million. Okay, because we're already starting with 300,000. Okay, in the last scenario, and there are a few different scenarios. I'm just stopping with three. But the last scenario that I put here is, let's say, for instance, we wanted to, we already had the 300,000. I'm saying we're using debt with a down payment. Let's say, for instance, we already have the 300,000, which we would use as a down payment on the business, and then we could basically finance the remaining amount. Borrow this amount. So finance the remaining amount of 892, and essentially we could do that immediately, right? So that's the note I put here. We don't have to save up the money because we already have the 300,000 as a down payment, and that means we can buy the business immediately. Now, one thing that would happen is if we did this, even though we would be able to buy the business immediately because we're using debt, it would actually change our numbers because some of the money that we're making from the business would not be able to cover our expenses because we're using some of that money to pay back the debt. But that's a little bit more complicated than I want to go into right now. But let's just keep the example simple and just disregard that fact for right now. But I did want to notate that because that is an important thing to notate. If we do borrow money, some of the money that we make has to be used to pay back the debt, which means it won't cover all of our expenses. Okay, so that's that. So a last question that we may be having is, well, where does a person go to buy a business in order to have this business produce this income? And long story short, there are many places out there. I went on the internet and typed in, buy business, and then what pops up is some of these business brokers, right? And basically what these online business brokers do, they list businesses that are for sale. We live in 21st century America. This is the most advanced economy in the history of the world. The buying and selling of businesses happen all day. Well, not all day, every day, but this is something that happens every day. This is par for the course in America. So there are many places that you can go in order to find businesses that are for sale. And as you can see here, let's even look at this business here. Just an example. I mean, I don't know this business from a can of paint, but it's a plumbing and heating business, and they're saying the price of this business is $1.5 million, and they're saying that this business is already making $500,000 per year. So I'm just looking at it as an example. This business is on sale for $349,000. This business is on sale for $349,000, and it's cash flow and it's making $150,000 per year. Maybe I'll make that larger. Yeah, on sale for $349 and it's making $150. Now, of course, you have to verify these numbers, but the point is there are businesses for sale, and once the family has come together and saved up the money, then there are things that we can go out there and purchase, businesses that we can go out there and purchase and run, and those businesses will be paying that income that we need. Okay. A few last notes I want to make before I wrap up the video is we don't have to get it all in one shot. We can build up one investment at a time. What I mean by that is we don't have to go out there. We don't have to wait 4 years until we can buy a business for 1.1 million. Maybe we start off with a business for 300,000 since we have 300,000 in cash. Maybe we buy a business for 500,000. My point is we don't have to wait 4 years until we got $1 million in order to get started. And what I mean by that is that's what I mean in point number one. We don't have to get it all in one shot. Maybe we buy one business 1 year, then let that business start making a certain amount of money, and then another year after we're comfortable with that, we buy another business, so on and so forth. So it's not something that we have to do in one fell swoop. We can do this incrementally by buying one business at a time, and then building up our portfolio of businesses, building up our portfolio of assets, and then having those assets produce the income that we seek eventually. Okay. Second thing I got here is by decreasing our living expenses, we decrease the amount of income needed to be produced by prospective business. So what I mean by that is this. Currently, right now, we need a business to produce based on how our lives are set up. This is our expense. This is our expense situation. So our expenses are $298,000, almost $300,000. But we can rearrange our lives in order to cut our expenses, and this number could go down. Maybe we can cut this number to 250. Maybe we can cut it to 225, so on and so forth. But if we rearrange our lives and cut our expenses to a certain point, then the business that we buy will not have to produce as much, which means all other things equal, the business itself will also be cheaper, meaning we can purchase the business quicker, and also, like I say, it's just less income is needed to cover our expenses if we were spending less money in the first place. Okay, so that's an important point to make. Point number 3 here. Business is not necessarily set it and forget it. So we will need to stay vigilant to continue earning year after year. What I mean by that is, even if we went out here and purchased one of these businesses, right? Let's say, for instance, we purchased a business here for, where's that 1.5? Let's say, for instance, we purchased this business here for, that's not the one. Yeah, this business for $1.5 million. And the cash flow that's currently being earned by this business is $525,000 per year. Now, that doesn't mean, what I mean by it can't be set it and forget it. We have to continue to work in order to make that business work, and we have to make that business successful. So it's not going to just be, we're not going to just be able to set it and forget it and expect that this business will continue to operate itself. Yeah, maybe we can hire managers and let the managers run the business. Maybe we can, whatever the case may be. But the point is, once we buy this business, we have to do the things that ensure that the business continues to make money, because this 525 is a historical number. This is the money that the previous owner has made with this business. So in order for us to continue to make that money, or maybe even more, then we have to do things to ensure that that happens. So that's what I mean by that last point. So these are things to keep in mind as we move forward to try to secure financial security for the family. All right. Okay. Yep, and that's basically the end of the presentation.